lot of us only see the vagina as a pleasure object.
Your life to be unbearably entertaining, and maybe all the sorrow and catastrophe has to be part of it, because otherwise there's nothing about it that's glorious. Like, it's hard for women to give themselves to men, and no wonder. It's amazing they ever do it. They have a lot on the line. What do we want? We want to play forever in God's heavenly garden. How about that? That's a metaphorical representation, right? But that's a walled garden. That's the human environment. The walls are the walls of your house. Mm-hmm. The garden is nature displaying itself in its beauty within boundaries. That's a place that play can take place. That's what you want. You got to think about it. What do you want? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we might ask, what do you mean want? Okay, if you were taking care of yourself and you could have what was good for you, what would that be? Now, that's a hard question, right? You're going to have to think about that for a long time. What would satisfy someone as miserable and resentful and useless as me, right? If I could have it. Now, people they don't even want to address that issue, because part of the problem with making your aim clear is when you're failing. Mm-hmm. And people would rather keep the evidence of their failure obscured from themselves, even if it meant continued failure. But now let's say you decide not to do that. You're going to think, okay, I'm going to aim high. I'm going to take care of myself. People think, well, I'll find the right person. It's like, first of all, no, you won't. Second, if you found the right person and they ever saw you, they just run away screaming. So it's just, the whole conceptual scheme is wrong. When I was on tour, there was one 3-day period where the same question emerged from the audience, because I do a Q&A 3 nights in a row. How do I find the person that's right for me? And I tried answering it. And by the 3rd night, I thought, oh, I know why I can't answer this question. It's because it's a stupid question. It's badly formulated, like profoundly badly formulated, fatally badly formulated. It's not the right question. The right question is, how can I learn to offer something to someone else that would make me eminently desirable? That's a way different question. They're not even in the same conceptual universe. And it's the right question, because you can build yourself into a person that people would line up to be with. The thing that makes men, by default, most attractive to women is their comparative success in the hierarchy of men. It's a walloping predictor, and it's irrelevant to men. Like, men don't care at all whether women are successful in their career. It's not a determinant of their attractiveness. In fact, it's often the contrary. It's the desire of the woman to find someone who brings a benefit to the relationship. And why? Well, because a woman will make herself vulnerable when she has a child. And so she's looking for a man who'll be helpful compared to her. Okay, so if the woman is like full of ability, well, then her standards for a guy who's going to be helpful get very high. And that's hard on her, because it decreases the pool of available candidates radically. In a free and easy mating environment, women don't trust men. And no wonder. Well, here's a terrible thing to know. So imagine that there are men who are oriented towards short-term relationships, and there are men who are oriented towards long-term relationships, committed relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that would be the men who want love along with sex, let's say, love and commitment. Then there's the party today because we're all dead tomorrow sort of guys. And there's some women like that too, although fewer women, because they pay a much higher price for sexual impropriety. Mm-hmm. So the pool of short-term maters has more men in it. Okay, what do they like? Well, the personality studies have already been done. They're Machiavellian, which means they use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic, which means they want unearned social status. They're psychopathic, which makes them predatory parasites. And they're sadistic. Okay, so now you open up the mating market so that short-term dalliances are acceptable. You throw all the women into the hands of the psychopaths. Well, that's a bad strategy. And it's no wonder that it decimates the mating market, because women are thinking, well, are those men trustworthy? And the answer is no. And sex is costly. Like, we have this immature delusion that we can free sex from like the grip of the oppressive patriarchy, let's say. It's like, no, you can't. Obviously, you can't. Emotional entanglements are an inevitable consequence of intimate physical relationships. There's that. Then there's the issue of abortion and pregnancy. That actually constitutes a problem. And then there's sexually transmitted disease. And that's just like the first of a very long list of potential problems with sex. So there's no simple sexual landscape. And there are deluded people who think there is a simple landscape and that there should be, but they tilt hard in the psychopathic direction because they're manipulative. So let's say you take the alternative approach, okay? You're going to try your partner on for size, so you live together. Well, first of all, we know that couples who live together are more likely to get divorced rather than less. We know that the probability of cheating is proportionate to the number of partners before the marriage or the committed relationship.
Really?
Well, partly that's just self-evidence. Like, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Right. So if you had a lot of partners, you're the sort of person who's likely to have a lot of partners. And then there's also a conceptual problem. It's like, are you shopping for a car? It's like, you're going to take it out for a test drive and see how it goes. Okay, that's not the right metaphor. And then here's another problem. I'm going to see what it's like to be married by living with this person. It's like, no, you're not. Because you don't know what it's like to be married until you're married. Whatever you're doing when you live together, that's not a model for what you're going to do when you're married, because being married is different. It's permanent. I know the stats on living together. It's like, you live with someone and then you marry them, you're more likely to get divorced.
So
it doesn't work. Like, the theory was, you try it out, and if it works, you go ahead with it. Yeah, well, the theory was wrong, because that isn't what happens. It actually increases the probability that the relationship will fail. It's also partly, you got to ask yourself what the message is. I know what the message is when you live with someone. It's pretty straightforward. You'll do unless someone better comes along, and I'll grant you the same opportunity. But Jesus, that's a hell of a foundation for a like long-term relationship. It's not simple. Well, why would it be simple? It's not. There isn't anything more difficult that you do in your entire life than find a partner and establish a family. It's like, it's going to be hard. How to do it optimally? Well, I can tell you in my own experience, I've known my wife since she was 8, and we were friends, good friends, and we kind of departed from each other during adolescence. I was a year younger than everyone in my class, and she matured faster. Women do anyways. And so that kind of split us apart. And we didn't get married till, I think we were about 27, something like that, 28. But it would have been better to do it earlier. Yeah, it's just time I didn't have with her. The general rule of thumb for life is that you should do what other people have done forever, unless you have a really good reason not to. Don't deviate from the straight and narrow path. Like, children are a multi-generational commitment, because it's children and grandchildren. And so the marriage is a signifier of that. And in order to stay with someone optimally over the longest period of time possible, it has to be serious. And for something to be serious, you have to throw everything at it. And you might say, well, love is enough. It's like, that's a very naive view of the world, because there'll be times, because that's kind of like saying, well, as long as we love each other and we're happy, we'll be together. It's like, well, if you're talking 40 years, there's going to be plenty of years in there where you're not happy and you probably don't love each other. So what then? Is it just going to dissolve? Or are you going to say, we're in this, come hell or high water, which is the vow. Come hell or high, and hell and high water, they're coming. And then you got to ask yourself, is this the person you want in the boat with you when hell and high water come? And that's not going to be fun. That's for sure. You want to do it alone? Or you think that when everything falls apart around you, you're going to be in a better position to find someone better? I don't think so. It's a long, and then, you take the marital vow in a religious sense and you do it in front of a community, right? So it signifies commitment, and you need that because, like, you think you can maintain all that commitment on your own? Maybe you can. I doubt it. Generally, people can't, like no one. We need to fortify ourselves in all sorts of ways to get through the things in life that are most difficult. What do I have to put in place to ensure that I'm doing the right thing? Well, when you're embarking on something difficult, like marriage, then you better have everything necessary in place. How can marriage not be a trap?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, right. Definitely. That's a very good question and an important one. How can marriage be a trap? How can not being married be a trap? How can being alone be a trap? How can being deluded about what holds people together be a trap? There's traps everywhere, man. There's traps everywhere. And so there's no risk-free pathway forward. There's just risk everywhere. Okay, so that's a really useful thing to know. Then the question would shift to something like, well, if I wanted to construct a relationship that was optimized, that's what you have to ask yourself. It's like, and your partner, it's like, what are we doing here? What do we want? Tammy and I decided, for example, when we first got married, I mentioned this to her right away when we decided that we were going to take things seriously. It was like, we're going to tell each other the truth. So that was part of the vision. Like, no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah, no matter what. She's been very good at that. I would say better than me. I've been good at it, but she's been really quite remarkably good at it. She really threw herself into it. And I mean, that causes a complete transformation, but there's plenty of skeletons in the closet to be revealed. God, that's for sure.
Pornography, is this a bad thing?
It's a terrible thing. Yeah, it's a terrible thing. Everything about it is terrible.
Really?
Well, first of all, it's addictive, and no wonder. I mean, any 13-year-old boy can now look at more beautiful, naked women in one day than the greatest king who ever lived managed in his whole life. Right, so it's like, wow, that's not sexual gratification. That's not good. It's not supposed to be easy, and it's easy. So how desperate do you have to be to get married? Not desperate at all. It's like, yeah, right. What do you know? You don't know anything. I'm married just because I'm in love. You're an idiot. God, to put you in a position where you're going to have the romantic adventure of your life, the true romantic adventure of your life, you're going to need love and desperation, buddy. You're going to need everything working on your side. Love, desperation, terror, shame, guilt, everything working for you. And so you take the easy road.
Pornography.
Sure, you're not desperate anymore. But I mean, this is women peel from the top. So men are trying to impress women all the time, and they'll do it in positive ways and in pathological ways. The window for sexual representation started to open in the 1920s, let's say, but it really got going with Playboy. Then Penthouse came out right after that. And Penthouse was like full frontal nudity display. And then Hustler came out, and Hustler was sort of, well, whatever Penthouse didn't show you, Hustler will show you. And it got pretty lowbrow, like it was a rough, low-class magazine. It just shed all the pretensions that Playboy and Penthouse had. And then the net came along. It's like all those engineers who couldn't establish a relationship with an actual woman exchanging pornography. What, 25% of internet traffic, something like that? That desire to exchange pornography, was that what created the net? Yeah. It was a huge part of it. What's that done? Well, as you pointed out, I think 30% now of Japanese men and women under 30 are virgins. It's about the same in Korea. Relationships between men and women are falling apart in the rest of the West in the same sort of way. Now, can you attribute that to pornography? Certainly part. Like if I was a young woman and I was looking at the pornography world online, I'd think, yeah, maybe not. There's nothing heroic about it, that's for sure. It's like it's obviously nothing to be proud of. That's a different issue than whether or not it's wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly not an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree about that. It's not an accomplishment. Well, maybe sex is supposed to be an accomplishment. Maybe you violate the spirit of sexuality itself when it's not an accomplishment. You certainly do that if you rape, right? So is it an accomplishment? Probably. So what if your accomplishment is false? Well, then what are you betraying? Well, if it's associated with sex, maybe you're betraying the most fundamental possible thing. It's certainly possible. Like, well, there's life in sex. That's pretty much that, right? You're alive and you reproduce from a biological perspective. And so you're violating the spirit of what? Maybe you're violating the spirit of relationship. Maybe you're violating the spirit of adventure, the spirit of romance, the spirit of reproduction, the spirit of life. Likely. I don't think pornography, masturbation fits into the ideal of heroic masculinity. I don't think anybody thinks that. There's something furtive about it and second rate. Obviously, it's ridiculous in a sense that we even have to have this discussion because obviously it's outrageous. It's outrageous. Battle between immediate gratification and medium to long-term investment, that's a real battle. You know, like the right amount of pleasure in the moment isn't zero. What you're trying to do is you're trying to optimize emotion and strategy over all time frames, right? Is that you should attempt to conduct yourself in a manner that is best, all things considered, over the longest possible conceivable span of time. That's what you want, is you want to balance your concentration on the present with your apprehension of the medium to long run. So I'll give you an example of that. So I did a course for Peterson Academy it's on the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is the longest record we have of Christ's direct utterances, let's say. And it constitutes the core of Christian ethics. It's a set of instructions, and the instructions are very specific. So essentially, the instruction is to aim at every moment at what's highest. Okay, so this is something you have to practice. Okay, so the idea is that at each moment you're bringing to bear a certain attitude, and the attitude is, I'm going to do what's best. Okay,
for who?
Now, all things considered, for me now in a way that works tomorrow, for me now in a way that works tomorrow and next week and next month and next year and 5 years from now and 10 years from now, in relationship to my wife, in relationship to my kids, to my parents, to my community, right? It's that whole identity. You're optimizing that. Now, you might not know how, but that's your aim. Okay, so that's the injunction to put the love of God above all else, to aim at what's highest. Now, you don't exactly know how to do that, but that doesn't matter. You can specify your aim. People say, I'm not judgmental. It's like, that's not a virtue. You want to use judgment all the time, but this is the pearl of great price that Christ speaks about, that anyone wise and wealthy would sell everything they own to purchase. There isn't anything better than that. Humility, one of the things that's emphasized. Well, what's humility? What's the opposite of pride? Well, humility is starting where you are. That's what humility is. And it's annoying because, like if your life is a mess, then you have to see that you're the person in that mess. And then you have to understand that your first attempt to redress the mess might not be something you're particularly proud of, I mean, I saw this lots in my clinical practice where people the first steps they had to take to put things in order were pretty embarrassing. It's like, really? That's all I can do? Hey, man, uphill is better than downhill. And there's a doctrine in the Gospels that Christ puts forward, which is very interesting. He says, it's the Matthew principle, it's called, to those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Okay, so it lays out a view of the world. Progress, regression. That's one model. Here's another one. Progress, regression. This is the right model. So even if you have to start small, you accrue success exponentially. You accrue defeat exponentially too. That's the abyss that is hell. You start going downhill, you go downhill faster and faster. Start going uphill, you go uphill faster and faster. So even if you have to start small or even painfully small, which is highly probable, especially if you're trying to tackle something that's really plagued you, it doesn't really matter. Readjusting the words you say about yourself, which would be something like self-esteem, which is something that doesn't even exist, by the way. It's just a pathological concept altogether. You want confidence, okay? More to the point, you want the confidence that's based in competence. Otherwise, it's narcissistic. Okay, so how do you develop that? Well, you watch yourself exceed your limits. And then you think, oh, look at that. There's something in me that can exceed my limits. That's your true self. That's a good way of thinking about it. That's Jacob's ladder. I would say this is the promise of the kingdom of God. That's one way of thinking about it. There's no upward limit. There's no limit to how bad things can get. No one would deny that who has any sense. So that means in a way that hell exists. You can find your way there with no problem. God comes to Abraham. Okay, now questions emerge from that statement. What do you mean, God? And how does he come to Abraham? What the hell does that mean? Well, the story lays that out. The God that comes to Abraham is the voice of adventure. It's a definition. So this is a good thing to know. God is the voice of adventure. Okay, so now let's think about this a little bit. So the God that's the voice of adventure is the God of the forefathers of Abraham, the father. He's a patriarchal spirit. Okay, if you're a good father, you speak with the voice of adventure to your sons. Obviously, you're encouraging them. It's like, get the hell out there, make something of yourself. Why do you do that? Because you have this little kid and you think, get at it, man. Let's see what you can be. And so that's that voice of the benevolent father, and that's the spirit of the ancestors. And behind that, there's the God who's the voice of adventure. If you pursue the spirit of adventure, there will be things you have to give up. Right, you know that. I mean, you're taking steps. We'd even say that. Steps forward in your life. What do you mean forward? What do you mean steps? Well, they're little adventures you have that transform you and transform your circumstances, okay? You have that adventure and you have to change as a consequence of it. You have to give up your immaturity so that you can take advantage of this new opportunity. Okay, and that changes you. Now you're a slightly different person. Now a new horizon of opportunity opens up. You have to make a sacrifice. It's like, okay, looks like if I'm going to do this, I can no longer afford this. Well, Abraham changes so dramatically that he gets a new name. He starts as Abram and he ends as Abraham. Abraham is the father of nations. So what's the moral? If you pursue the spirit of adventure and make the proper sacrifices, you become the father of nations. Right? That's true. Western culture is the amalgamation of Greece, Jerusalem, and Rome. So, and the early Christians saw tremendous parallels between Christian theology and Greek philosophy. The atheist scientist.
Okay.
It's not right.
Yeah.
Factually, they were wrong. Their theory of perception was wrong. They're wrong. We see the world through a story. We do not see the world as a collection of facts. They're wrong. Try. See what happens. You can't do it. You can't create your own values because values are real. They're not arbitrary. They're not relativistic. The story of Noah. God is the impulse that comes to the wise to prepare when trouble's brewing.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so now you can think of that as an instinct. You can think about it as
Gut instinct, intuition.
negative emotion,
Yeah.
anxiety, but it's more than that. But you see, you can't exactly get there by the mere bottom-up materialistic notion, because you could think about the fear that guides Noah as an instinct, but the instinct is pathological unless it exists in this wider moral framework, because then you could have the fear of a coward. Well, that's not helpful. Sex and reproduction aren't the same thing for people.
Not anymore, certainly.
Well, not at all, because we're high investment reproducers. Sex just gets the ball rolling. So here's a question. How would you have to act to maximally ensure the survival of your offspring? Okay, so now, what do you mean survival? Do you mean that your son lives? Do you mean that your grandson lives? Do you mean that 20 generations down the road from you, the pattern that you represented is still propagating itself successfully? Mm-hmm. Does it mean that the people that you produce are able to take on all challengers because of the manner in which they conduct themselves? That's a lot more complicated than just sex, like way more complicated. So the pattern that Abraham is the father of nations, right? There's an insistence in the story that the manner in which he conducts himself as a hero establishes the pattern that makes his descendants successful eternally. Is the Bible in part the story of human beings coming to consciousness? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Does it reflect a deeper underlying reality? Yes.
Yeah.
How deep is that underlying? Well, let's say, okay, it's a story about the psyche. And then let's say, well, no, it's a story about the psyche in society. Okay, so, well, no, it's a story about the psyche in society, in the natural world. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, what's underneath that? The source of nature, society, and the psyche. It's voluntary self-sacrifice. Right, you offer yourself up in the service of something higher. That's the basis of society. That's the basis of psychological stability. The Christian insistence is that that's the basis of the world. I think that the claim that Christ is the embodiment of the prophet and the laws, I think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
that's complicated. It's very, very complicated, but I think it's true.
So you believe that Jesus was
God?
God.
Yeah. I think if you understand what that means, that it's indisputable. I'll give you a brief explanation of why. Christ takes the sins of the world onto himself. So that means all the problems that there are his problems. Right. Okay, so the idea there is that there's no difference between making that assumption and then actually beginning to address those problems. And there's no difference between that which best addresses the problems of mankind and the divine. Those are the same thing. And I can't see how that can be otherwise, because the contrary hypothesis would be that you would adapt best to your life by avoiding things that are difficult and terrifying. And no one believes that. And so the pattern of the passion, this is the voluntary self-sacrifice issue taken to its extreme. The pattern of the passion is the decision to voluntarily confront and welcome anything that happens to you, no matter what it is. And that's a terrible thing to ask or endeavor to undertake, but well, the alternative is to shrink away. Well, the spirit of shrinking away is the divine. It's like, I don't think so. Like that's preposterous. The spirit of unlimited courage Well, that's not a bad start for a definition of what constitutes the divine. The highest possible value. I went through 3 years where every minute of my life was worse than any minute I'd ever had previous to that. It was terrible. And did I lose faith? Was it questioned, challenged? Absolutely. Absolutely. It just became absurd. It was absurd. So many things had gone off the rails. My wife was dying, my daughter was ill. Things had blown up around me in 50 different ways, and I was like seriously in pain. It was terrible. I was walking like 12 miles a day because I couldn't sit. I did that for months. Winter, rain, whenever. I had a friend who walked with me. It was terrible. And yeah, I mean, I thought, what was the desperation? It wasn't even the pain. It was the fact that I was in such terrible shape that I felt that I believed that I was a burden to everyone around me and that was only likely to get worse. And I thought, what's the sense in this? What's the possible significance of this? So yes, everyone's faith is challenged. I mean, Christ himself cries in despair out to God on the cross. And the story wouldn't be believable without that. Like, if you're going to live, you're going to be pushed past your limit, right? If you're going to live. So, but who knows what you discover when you're pushed past your limit? Now, what are we built for? We're built for maximal challenge. And that isn't the way we view ourselves in the modern world. We view ourselves as built for pleasure, pornography. We view ourselves as built for consumption or for safety or for maybe for egotistical self-aggrandizement and fame. All of those things are better than their absence, let's say. There's what you want in your life. You want it to be unbearably entertaining. And it's funny, when you watch people go to movies, I mean, James Bond, right? That's an unbearably entertaining life. And that's what people want to see when they go to a theater, because that's what they want. That's what they want. And maybe all the sorrow and catastrophe that's part of that has to be part of it, because otherwise there's nothing about it that's glorious. Because life is very wide. There's the peaks and valleys are very distant from one another. And I don't know, maybe as you ascend uphill, your understanding of the chasm between the peaks and valleys also increases. Because you think maybe as you're successful, you're happier. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that success and happiness are the same thing. I'm not sure that we want them to be the same thing. I don't even know what people mean when they say they want to be happy. If you investigate it, technically, you find out that really what people mean when they say they want to be happy is that they don't want to suffer. That's different than the enthusiastic joy that you might think about, that's part and parcel of a child's laughter. You want to be happy. What, do you want to be laughing all the time? Is that what you're saying? Well, no, that's not what I mean. Well, what do you mean? Do you mean the gratification that comes along with the cookie at 1 a.m? No, that's not what I mean. Well, okay, what do you mean? Well, I don't know. It's like, yeah, you don't know. Partly what you mean is you don't want pointless suffering. Fair enough, fair enough. But that doesn't mean it's happiness that's your goal. That's a very good illustration of distributed identity.
Yeah.
It's like you are your wife and your friends and your family.
Yeah.
Right? Fundamentally, there cannot be any separation there. That's and when you said you experienced that, it's like that's what gives you That's part of what gives you a foundation. It's like, yeah, that's not illusory.
Mm.
But and then we're talking about a kind of ultimate scarcity.
Yeah.
And like you can ask yourself, one of the fundamental questions you can ask yourself is, what is the nature of the real? Right. And I think death makes things real.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you forgive the people that you love for not being everything they could be? That's a hard question. It's okay, dear. It's like, is it now? I think we have a lot of that in our culture. It's okay. I like you just like you are. Noah is described in the story of Noah as a man wise in his generations. So that means that by the moral standards of his time, he's an upstanding human being. Okay, so now you can imagine that means he exists in harmonious relationship with his present self and his future self.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes him mature. But then he also does that in a way that serves his wife and his family and his community.
Mhm.
So his self is balanced and optimized across those parameters. That makes him secure in his foundation and properly oriented. If you're secure in your foundation and properly oriented upward, then there's no difference between the voice of the divine and the instinct that preserves you in times of trouble.
They call it old-fashioned. They call it restrictive. But truth be told, staying a virgin, walking the straight and narrow, is one of the boldest acts of rebellion in today's world. Because in a culture drowning in temptation, purity isn't weakness, it's warfare. When everyone else is selling pieces of themselves for likes, lust, and validation, you're choosing to guard what God made sacred. Look around. Broken homes, emotional scars, addictions that started with just one moment of compromise. The wide road promises freedom, but delivers chains. The straight and narrow may look lonely, but it leads to peace, power, and purpose. When you stay pure, you protect your mind from guilt, your heart from regret, and your soul from spiritual death. When you walk the narrow path, you become a light in a dark generation, proof that holiness still has a voice. So don't be ashamed of your standard. Wear it like armor. Because staying a virgin isn't just about saying no, it's about saying yes to a future God can bless. And walking the straight and narrow isn't about perfection, it's about pursuit. Pursuit of truth, pursuit of peace, pursuit of Christ. Hold the line, guard your purity, because in the end, only one road leads home.